All right, we got the Big 12 tournament bracket pulled up, and we have the odds for it as well. These odds are courtesy of FanDuel Sportsbook. Let's go to the odds first. Actually, we're moving all over the place here. Thank you to everyone listening. Let's go to FanDuel real quick. We've got the Big 12 tournament odds. We have Houston as almost an even favorite, plus 105. Texas Tech at plus 390. Iowa State 6-1. Arizona 7-1. Kansas, the Jayhawks, 12-1. BYU, the Red Hot Cougars, 16-1. Baylor 35-1. And then it has a steep drop off with West Virginia and Cincinnati down there at plus 10,000 or higher. Ben, initially looking at the odds right here, who jumps out to you?
I think it jumps out to me BYU, Kansas, both of those teams.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Texas Tech too, but I am surprised. I was hoping Texas Tech was one that'd be a little more under the radar than it is.
Yeah, everyone's kind of starting to fall in love with them. Yeah,
which I think is deserved. I like them a lot. I think it was interesting how low BYU was.
I know, but I think it makes sense once you look at the bracket. You look at BYU's path; they're going to have to face
Houston,
Iowa State, Houston, and then probably Texas Tech or Arizona. That's a tough path.
It's tough,
but as two people who root for BYU, essentially, it's not. This tournament doesn't necessarily matter in my mind for them.
No, it doesn't. It'd be cool, but they're a team that definitely has second weekend aspirations. So I think it's a little bigger than this Big 12 tournament for them.
So going through this bracket right now, the Tuesday slate, look, none of those teams are making it to March Madness. It's kind of gross. Cincinnati's got to be the biggest disappointment in that group on Tuesday. The fact that they're playing there and they're the 13th seed in this conference when they were finished to be top 5 and they were a top 25 preseason team in the country. Rough season for over there in Cincinnati by Wes Miller. Looking at this bracket right now, Ben, what do you like about it? What's catching your eye? What's the matchup you're looking for?
I think the matchup that I would enjoy is I would love a Baylor Texas Tech game.
Yes.
Just because I think Baylor's a team, right? That they've got guys like Rob Wright, Jeremy Roach, VJ Edgecombe is the guy who's kind of the headliner for them. You got Norchad O'Meara in the front court. They've got the talent to knock off Texas Tech, right? I mean, no matter what Baylor does, I think both of us are going to kind of agree they're a team that you can talk yourself into very, very easily. So I'd 100%. Say Baylor, Texas Tech.
Yep, I think that's the matchup right there too. The Tuesday, Wednesday games don't necessarily get me out of bed too much. I mean, I'm going to watch them and I'm going to be excited and everything, but they don't really get me out of bed. There's a reason most of these games are on ESPN Plus on Tuesday, Wednesday. But when you look at Thursday, this is a loaded slate on Thursday. BYU, Iowa State, Houston, West Virginia, Baylor, Texas Tech, Arizona, Kansas. If all goes chalk in the second round of this tournament, that is an elite Thursday slate of games. Baylor, Texas Tech is my pick, the one I'm most excited about. And then let me get a repeat of one of the best games I've seen all season, double overtime thriller, BYU, Iowa State. That is an awesome way to kick things off at 10:30 Mountain time zone we're in right now, Ben. What a great way to kick off the Thursday of the Big 12 slate. I'll go BYU, Iowa State. I'm very excited for that matchup. And you're talking about the dark horses and the lower odds teams. I actually don't think Houston wins this tournament, Ben, because everybody's putting Houston in as a shoe-in no matter what. They've played with their food a little bit, man. And I've gotten some DMs talking about this, being like, "Hey, you're way too disrespectful to Houston. Houston is this national title contender team and everything like that." I need to see it to believe it in March, man. It's one of those where I just think the way they play is not designed well for March Madness. Because these refs like to call it tighter. Playing physical like that only gets you in trouble in March Madness eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue, for me, it's not really the style. It's more just that I think they're just more talented teams out there this year that that like I don't see Houston beating Florida. We've already seen Auburn beat Houston. I'd kind of expect them to beat Houston if they played again. Duke would beat Houston. So it's really less about Houston. Like I think this is the most well-rounded team they've had on paper, but you just look at the other teams. I just think it's too top heavy for them this year. But yeah, I also agree. I don't like them to win the Big 12 title either.
Who do you like then, and where do they slip up?
I think Houston slips up to BYU. And I think Texas Tech beats BYU in the title.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. I also have Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech is winning this thing. I think Texas Tech is the right move. Maybe I just love the 2 seeds in all these brackets, but Texas Tech, man, they are just so well designed to be a great team in March. And, you know, their path is pretty favorable when you look at it right now. You know, Houston probably has the easiest first round game, or, you know, their first game in the quarterfinals, which should check out. You're the number 1 team. You should get that. Then you get. I would much rather play Arizona or Kansas in the semifinals than BYU or Iowa State, especially a healthy Iowa State.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. I do think also as well with this, like I think BYU is a team. Although I'm picking them to beat Houston, I think it's a tougher matchup. Like I think Houston loses to either of these teams. That's just my hot take. But I think they'd rather see BYU than Iowa State. I think Iowa State could potentially pose problems for Houston.
I think so too. I think either of these teams definitely can. I think Houston would want to see BYU more just because they remember that matchup back in January where they won by 30 plus points and dominated BYU and bullied the crap out of them. But it's a different BYU team at this point, and they're red hot. As someone who is a BYU fan right now, I think the best case scenario is going to 1-1. Even 0-1 isn't a disaster as long as that loss is to Iowa State and it's not a blowout or anything. I think you're kind of playing with house money if you're BYU in this tournament.
100%. If they lose to Iowa State, like I won't really bat an eye. Like,
no.
I'm picking BYU. It's partially biased, but I think whoever wins that game can give Houston a very tough game in the semis.
So I'll just run through my bracket real quick. I have Cincinnati, Iowa State, and then I have TCU versus West Virginia, and then I have Kansas State versus Baylor. I'm going very chalk, and then I have UCF over Utah on Tuesday. Wednesday, moving on, I have chalk, basically all chalk across the board. Iowa State, BYU, that's going to be the quarterfinal matchup. West Virginia, Houston. Give me Baylor versus Texas Tech, and Kansas versus Arizona. I think we get chalk at that point, and then that's where I think things open up a little bit. I think Iowa State takes down BYU, and then I'm going Houston versus Iowa State in the semis. On the bottom half of that bracket, I like Baylor versus Texas Tech. I like Texas Tech, like I mentioned before, and I like Kansas taking down Arizona again. I think Kansas is going to be a team that sneaky people go, oh, they're a little hot right now, you know, going into March Madness, and then you realize they just can't shoot the ball at all. They just don't have enough players to make shots. And I kind of, for what I want, my short position on Kansas basically is that I want them to make a run in this tournament. I want them to do really, really well in the Big 12 tournament just so I can fade the absolute crap out of them come March Madness, kind of like how you said with Kentucky.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with you going through my bracket, I have the same thing up until the quarterfinals, but I have BYU beating Iowa State, BYU then beating Houston to go to the title. I also agree that I have Baylor versus Texas Tech winning that game. UCF beating Utah, right? That's what I said, that I agreed with you there. I've got Kansas beating them. Kansas also beating Arizona. Texas Tech beats Kansas, and then Texas Tech beats BYU on Saturday.
Yeah, and I'll flip it. I have Texas Tech over Iowa State in the title game, and I'd love to be proven wrong.
I think that's the right one. I think that is the right one. I kind of let my blue goggles get in the way a little bit, but. And
if I were to go with a dark horse here, I would lean towards picking BYU or Baylor, according to the FanDuel odds right now. Baylor 35-1, BYU 16-1. That's what I would want to go with there. If I'm actually just betting this thing, I would lean towards Texas Tech plus 390, but it's not a super sexy pick. But I think Texas Tech might be set up best for this Big 12 tournament, in my opinion. And the other thing about Houston is Kelvin Sampson has said it multiple times. He does not care about conference tournaments and just wants to be 100% healthy going into March Madness. So teams can get Houston. We've seen that. We even saw it last year in the Big 12 title game. So, and TJ Otzelberger and those guys, they got it done last year. So, anything else from this tournament?
Nope. I also like Kansas to potentially make a run. They're kind of my dark horse a little bit too.
I
for the same reasons at Kentucky. But
yeah, I want Kansas to make a run so bad just so we can fade the freaking crap out of them in March Madness.